Y'all can't tell, but my breath smells so much of garlic. Interview with a Vampire. Listen, I recorded my reaction, review, opinions of season 1 a while back, but some way, somehow, I lost the video. I think I accidentally deleted it because I thought it was something else. So I'm gonna do it again, and it will potentially be a little bit more diluted than the first time, but I remember the 2 main points that I made and 1 comment. 2 main points and 1 comment. First of all, everyone that voted Lestat as being a flawed character rather than an abuser, I have bad news. I have bad news for you. Every abuser is a flawed person. Okay, but seriously, for those of you who don't know, which how could you? I don't think I've ever mentioned it. I have mentioned it. For those of you who don't know, I have a degree in psychology. I have a master's actually in applied psychology, and I worked for a few years as a victim support officer, technician, whatever. I was a psychologist working with victims of gender-based violence and domestic violence mostly. So I'm pretty familiar with the behaviors and the dynamics and the manipulation inside an abusive relationship. And that's what it was. I mean, I'm not surprised that most people would characterize Lestat as flawed rather than abusive, but because, I mean, he is flawed. He is flawed. His flaw happens to be being an abuser. But let me explain why I think this is and what are the behaviors and the dynamics that I spotted in the TV show that they actually did pretty well. Like they did it pretty well. Very simply, what maintains an abusive relationship is this thing that we call the abuse cycle. It has 3 phases, and it starts with the escalation phase where something starts to happen. Sometimes it's a little bit of humiliation, an insult here, a manipulation there, a lie over there. It starts with very tiny things. It starts with things that are so small that in the beginning, no one would even call it abuse. Like, for example, Lestat lying about the fact that he has a lover, that he didn't tell Louis, or maybe Lestat, when Louis comes home, that he's very bothered by the fact that he almost bit off the neck of a baby. Lestat's response is basically to diminish it and say, okay, let's go to the opera. It's stuff like this. It's like, it's not exactly abuse isolated. It's more considered a lie or a manipulation or a humiliation, even though humiliation is abuse. But together with everything else, it makes up the cycle of violence because it doesn't stay that way. It doesn't stay as a little lie. It doesn't stay as a little manipulation. It always escalates. And this is phase 1 of the cycle, is little by little, the little violences or manipulations or lies or abuse moments that happen in the relationship, little by little, they get worse and more frequent until it gets to a point where there's an explosive episode. The only one I can remember, I think there were many over the course of the TV show. The big one that we all remember is when he dropped him out of the sky. And and that's basically the catharsis. So there has been this energy, this violence that has been accumulating and getting worse, and then it gets to a point where the abuser snaps, and there is usually a violent episode. It's either physical violence or extreme emotional violence. And then after this comes the honeymoon phase. The honeymoon phase is the 3rd phase of the cycle, and it's basically when the abuser apologizes profusely, promises never to do it again, gives the victim a lot of gifts, a lot of attention, a lot of affection, basically becomes the sweet person that the victim met in the very beginning of the relationship before any of this started. And they stay like that. They stay a very sweet person for some time. And then it goes back to the escalation phase. It goes back to little things that become bigger things that eventually become an explosive episode. And it just goes like this. And as it goes like this, it starts getting worse. The honeymoon phase starts getting smaller. The violence starts getting more severe. And it gets to a point where either the victim escapes, or they die at the end of the abuser, or they're just very much submissive and stay in this relationship, which happens to a lot of people. They stay in these relationships for life and are just very severely abused all their lives. And so you ask, Joe, if it is that abusive, why would anyone stay? Well, because it isn't all bad. Like, no one would stay in a relationship that only hurts them. The reason victims stay is because of the honeymoon phase. I mean, the way that I explain it is simplistic because it's for you to understand it, but the honeymoon phase happens a lot. Even during the acceleration, there are smaller cycles that are going on, small little fights and discussions where the abuser apologizes again and again and again and is very sweet and whatever. Like, the relationship is never all bad. There are parts that are really nice for the victim, and this is why they stay. And this is why Louis stays. And the way that the bond between the person who sired the vampire and the vampire is described is as this very special bond. But how did it start? The bond, or the day that Lestat sired Louis, was the most shit day of Louis' life. He was completely vulnerable. I mean, his brother had just died, not just died, offed himself, threw himself off a roof in front of Louis. His brother had just died, and his mother was blaming him for it. He felt completely isolated. He felt responsible. He felt guilty. He felt ashamed. He was ready to end it. And that's when Lestat chose to offer him the gift, the dark gift, whatever they call it. And I've seen this happen time and time and time again, where an abuser is an intelligent person. They're not idiots. They know who to choose. They won't choose a person who is surrounded by family and protected. They won't choose a person who is extremely self-confident, who knows what they deserve. No, they choose vulnerable people with self-esteem issues, with family issues. That's who they choose. Lestat chose Louis for a freaking reason. And I know what you're gonna say. I know. Lestat was interested in Louis way before then. But think about it. Louis was vulnerable from the very start because Lestat knew from the very start that Louis was gay. That Louis was trying to rise in life with a profession that was despised by everyone else. He was a black man in a white man's world. He knew that Lestat was vulnerable from the very beginning, and the fact that his brother offed himself, which I still think was in part Lestat's responsibility. I do. And Louis did too, because Louis asked that too. And I mean, can we completely believe Lestat that he didn't have anything to do with Louis' death? Can we? Because he's a liar and a manipulator. Can we believe that? But yeah, my point is that Louis was always vulnerable, and Lestat met a Louis vulnerable from the very freaking beginning, and he took the opportunity of his lowest moment of his life to transform him into a vampire. And he did it how? How did he do it? Without even telling him everything that it implied. He didn't explain to him everything there was to know about being a vampire. In fact, he didn't even tell him everything that he could do after he transformed him. He hid that away from him. I mean, the only time when Louis found out Lestat could fly was when he almost killed him. Tell me that's not an abusive man. And then when Louis accepted him back, even though Claudia was onto Lestat's bullshit from the beginning, when Louis accepted Lestat back, immediately, Louis and Claudia became his captives, his knock-knock slaves. His slaves. I will never be a Lestat defender. I'm so sorry, but it's a bit impossible. And then, I'll get to season 2 in a bit, but just to mention this, because we get a little bit of information at the end that Lestat was the one that protected Louis and not, what's his name? The dude. His other boyfriend. I don't remember his name. It's, German? No. His other boyfriend. It wasn't his other boyfriend who protected Louis, it was Lestat. Even when we found that out, I'm like, okay, didn't he participate in the play that was about to kill him? If he really wanted to help Louis, he would have warned him. Isn't it reasonable to think that Lestat didn't warn Louis and participated with them in the play because he knew that he could save... My mic was going to fall off. What was I saying? He knew he could save Louis, but wanted Claudia gone. Anyway, maybe I'm exaggerating with that one. But still, he willingly participated in the damn freaking play instead of warning Louis of what was coming. So that's what I think about Lestat. Now, the way it is written, like, I kind of want to read the book because the way it is written is freaking poetic. It's freaking poetic. You can't change my mind about this. It's so beautiful. And this is the only thing that makes me conflicted about Lestat, is how a person could have such a deep understanding of humanity and of the world, and could have such deep thoughts inside his head, such profound thoughts inside his head. A person who could come from nothing, survive what he survived. I mean, he had so much money at one point, he was living the rich life, and then he went to nothing again. And like the way that Louis met him on that afternoon or evening where the tornado was coming or whatever was coming, like, his life is complex and layered, because this is the thing that a lot of people say about abusers is, how could they have known better if this is all they were taught? But it's not a logical argument, because if that were true, everyone who was abused would become an abuser, and then no one that grew up in an healthy family would become an abuser. And that's not true. We know that a lot of people that grow up being abused are not abusers, and a lot of people that grow up in healthy families are abusers. And it's a combination between who you are, what your influences are, what your society is. It's a lot of things that determine this. A lot of your decisions as a person that determine who you become. And the fact that Lestat survived so much, had such a beautiful mind to have appreciation for the arts in the way that he did, and still couldn't understand how wrong it was what he was doing to Louis. It really makes you reflect of how, like, everyone in the world thinks what they're doing is the right thing. I mean, I would bet that most people who are doing fucked up shit in the world don't know or don't even admit to themselves that it's fucked up shit. I mean, some people, I'm sure they know what they're doing is wrong. I'm sure it gets to a point where it's so big, they must know it's wrong. But I think most people, like common people that do, because I mean, we all know people who are manipulative, who are liars, who are just assholes. We all know them in our daily lives. And no way they think their way about themselves. An abuser doesn't think they're an abuser. An abuser thinks they have the right to do whatever they want. They think that the world revolves around them, that the reason they are the way they are is because of what they went through in their lives or whatever. Like, they have 1,001 excuses for what they do. But yeah, I guess watching Lestat kind of wakes up my own stereotypes, which I shouldn't have, but as a person in the world I still have, that people with higher education, higher understanding of the world, higher understanding of themselves and of other people would be less vulnerable to fall into this abuser mindset. But of course that's not true, because we know that abuse and domestic abuse and dating violence and all that happens in all social classes. Whether a person is rich or not, whether a person is highly educated or not, it happens everywhere. The only reason we don't know about the rich people that are abused is because most of them just hide it. They have the money to hide it. But yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, how can you be so smart and be so intrigued about the world and about the art in the world and be an abuser? How can you understand complex human emotions and still think it's okay to lash out at someone else like that? Because in season 2, we get Lestat's perspective on what happened that night, and we see that Louis was a lot more violent than we previously thought. But that doesn't justify it. It doesn't. It doesn't justify it. Like, if a person, especially because Lestat was in a position of power, Lestat could have simply, took off and flown out of there and de-escalated the situation. But he didn't. He chose in that moment, knowing full well that he was more powerful than Louis, he chose in that moment to strike back. Abuser. And to my final point / comment. I freaking love Claudia. Love her. She was the woman of my heart. This was my favorite character in the entire show, was Claudia. The way that baby girl, woman in a baby girl body, the way that she turned to Lestat and she started singing that damn song just as she was turning to dust. Louis could never. Lestat could never. No. Claudia. I just knew. In season 2, when they were telling the story, they were talking a lot about Claudia, blah, 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 and there was no Claudia around. I just freaking knew that something had happened to her. And it was like the whole time I was waiting for it. The whole time it was breaking my freaking heart, because I love, that was the best character of the show. Because genuinely, I related so much to that girl. Because tell me why this person who is brought into this world by these 2 deranged men who are in an abusive relationship because one of them is lonely, and she's brought into this world and she never finds freaking peace. Because the moment she decides to walk out of her toxic family environment, she finds what? She finds what? The freaking vampire. And to me, it was like, I cannot explain to you what this plot line did to me, because let me unpack it for you. The plot line where Claudia gets essayed for a week. We don't find out this until season 2. For a freaking week. Let me unpack this for you. Do you remember when Alzi, I think it was Alzi, was doing a podcast with one of those podcast guys, and she said that the big difference between men and women was that men or young men want power so they can use it to abuse someone else, and young women want power so they can use it to not be abused. And tell me why this was resonating with me during the scene where we find out what happened to Claudia. I mean, we see it in his eyes, what he's going to do to Claudia. And it's just like, Claudia, in that moment, after she went through freaking hell, almost burning alive, after going through hell with Lestat and the whole, abusive dynamic family, she was one of the most powerful creatures in the world. One of 100 vampires around the world. One of the most no man that came close to her could ever hurt her. No human man could ever hurt her. She, at that moment in time, she had the power to fight off 99.9% of the male creatures in the world. But even though she had all that power, after what she went through, even though she was a powerful, strong-ass vampire, there was still a man more powerful than her. And doesn't that just drive shivers down your freaking spine? That you could become one of the most powerful creatures in our case, in the real world case. You could become, as a woman, you could become one of the most powerful humans alive. You could become, I don't know, top 100 most powerful humans alive, and someone else will always be more powerful than you and will always have the power to do that to you. Because they would. Because they would. Think about the richest man on the planet. What can touch him? What can touch him? So yeah, that scene... Like, the way that this show has been written, I don't know if it's like the book is this good or was like the show was improved, but I was dying. Genuinely. And then there's another aspect to Claudia, which comes in season 2, where she's a little girl. No, she's a full-grown woman trapped inside the body of a little girl. And, oh my God, she finally finds a place where she feels like she belongs. She goes through literal war, like she's crawling through the ashes of war as the war is ending. And she finally finds a place where she feels like she can build family, like she could stay there, like she could have a community of people around her. And 2 seconds later, they put her in a little girl costume and say, for the next 50 years, you're going to be a little girl. Knowing full well, those vampires knew full well that children vampires tend to struggle and tend to have problems because they are trapped inside of the body of a child. And let's not be blind. Let's not be blind about this. Let's not pretend like the show runners, the writers didn't know what they were doing, because they knew. Because isn't this what society expects of us, of women, to be these perfect little porcelain dolls, submissive to their husbands for the rest of our lives? Isn't this what they expect of us? I mean, let's not pretend that there aren't countries out there in the world that actually make it legal for grown-ass men to marry little girls. Like, at that point, Lestat was just a picture on the wall. That was interesting to me. Like, Lestat and Louis, sure, they're an interesting dynamic. Louis and the other guy, sure, interesting dynamic. Claudia? To me, Claudia was the heart of the show. Like, I was screaming and crying on the floor for that girl. And the girl she found, the seamstress who took a German for a lover during the war, and was like publicly shamed on the street afterwards. The woman that she found, that she could have stayed with the coven if she had renounced Claudia, and she was like, fuck no, I'ma die with her. See, put in the same position, neither Lestat nor the other guy would have done the same for Louis. Let's not be, let's not get it twisted. Neither of them would have done that for Louis. Now about the interviewer. The whole time I was waiting for it. Like, if they turned the old man, the old reporter into a vampire, I would be satisfied. You know, I would be full in my belly. And they did it, and I saw his eyes, and I was like, perfect. The only thing that I want now, that I'll never have, is Claudia back. That's the only thing I want. I want Claudia back. Lestat who? Louis who? Arnaud? Damn it. The other guy who? I want Claudia. But yeah, that was my impression of Interview with the Vampire. Hated, loathed that damn theater club. Hated all of it. I wish it had never happened because they took my Claudia. But yeah, that is my impression of Interview with the Vampire. If I find something else to say that I forgot to say here, I'll put it in another video. But so far, I think that's it. I don't think I'll ever rewatch this show because there's a lot of abuse and manipulation in it. But yeah. Do you know what I think, though? Do you remember when Lestat said to Louis and to Claudia, "You don't want to meet the other vampires out there. They are horrible. They're horrible to be around." I think that was one of the few moments where he wasn't actually lying. I think he was telling the truth. And Lestat truly believed that the other vampires out there were shit. Because they were shit. I mean, even the boyfriend, I forget his name, the boss of the theater crew, the boyfriend, even the boyfriend, the one that he discovers had betrayed him all along, even him was a piece of shit. Like, literally the only true good vampires were those three, Louis, Claudia, and her girlfriend. Did we ever meet? No, we never met any better. Those were the only good three ones. So, out of everything, I think that was the one truth Lestat really ever told. All the other vampires truly are shit. I don't know if there's a season 3 coming, but if there is one coming, I really want to hear more about Louis and the reporter, the interviewer. Everyone else I don't care. I mean, it would be fun to see a vampire war, but I don't think this is the kind of show for it. This is the kind of show for like intimate scenes with vampires, not big scale events. So, yeah. Let me know if there's a season 3 coming. I mean, I'll Google it later, but yeah, that's it from me. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. I watched it a while ago. I wanted to record my kind of review of season 2, but because I lost my video of season 1, it just came out this way. Yeah, I think that's it. Tell me in the comments what else you think I should watch. Maybe I'll make a poll about it. Bye!